Hello, today I want to talk about the serial killer Andrei Chikatilo. This is a story of maps, timelines, and bureaucratic files. It spans 12 years, from December 1978 to November 1990. It covers a geographic area larger than many European countries, from the forests of the Rostov region to the industrial outskirts of Moscow and the distant city of Ufa. The official victim count is 52 children, teenagers, and young women. The suspect list compiled by police contained over 25,000 names. The cost in resources was immense. The cost in human life, incalculable. This is the chronological story of Andrei Chikatilo, not as a psychological case study, but as a sequence of concrete events, crimes, investigatory steps, mistakes, and turning points. Our first, overarching question is this. In a state with a pervasive surveillance apparatus and a powerful, centralized police force, how could one man commit 52 murders across 12 years? Was it his cunning, or a perfect storm of systemic failures? The foundational error, 1978 to 1981. Our timeline begins not with a spree, but with an isolated act that would poison the entire future investigation. December 22, 1978, Shakti. 9-year-old Lena Zakidnova is last seen near her home on Pobeda Street. A witness reports seeing a man in a Koriknevaya Kurska, a brown jacket, talking to her. Her body is discovered 2 days later in the icy, muddy waters of the Grashevka River, under a bridge on Shevchenko Street. The autopsy reveals she was stabbed 3 times in the abdomen with a thin, blade-like instrument and died from internal bleeding. Police action and suspect. The investigation focuses quickly. The description of the brown jacket fits a local man, Alexander Kravchenko, a 25-year-old factory worker with a record for petty theft and hooliganism. More importantly, the garage from which the killer likely operated belonged to a friend of Kravchenko's. He becomes the prime suspect. The interrogation, under sustained and intense interrogation, common for the era, Kravchenko breaks. He confesses to the murder of Lena Zakidnova. The details of his confession are messy, but under pressure, he provides enough information for the prosecution. He is tried, found guilty, and sentenced to death. The aftermath. In 1984, Alexander Kravchenko is executed by firing squad. The case of Yelena Zakidnova is officially and triumphantly closed. The files are sealed. The police in Rostov have solved a horrific child murder. But here is the critical, factual divergence. In 1990, a serial killer named Andrei Chikatilo would confess in explicit detail to murdering Lena Zakidnova. He described luring her to a shack, his attack, and dumping her body in the river. Forensic evidence would later corroborate his presence. This creates our first major investigative crossroad. The murder of Lena Zakidnova was, in fact, Chikatilo's first kill. The conviction of Kravchenko was a catastrophic error. But let's be forensically specific. The murder of Zakidnova differed from Chikatilo's later, signature crimes. She was stabbed, but not mutilated post-mortem, and her body was dumped in water, not left in a forest. Did these differences, in the eyes of investigators in 1982, when the spree began, legitimately separate this crime from the new series of murders, thus protecting the ghost of the already executed killer? The pattern emerges. 1982 to 1983. A long pause follows. Then, in the summer of 1982, a new and horrific pattern begins. June 1982, near Shakhty. 13-year-old Larissa Tkachenko, a resident of a children's shelter, disappears from a bus stop. Her body is found weeks later in a wooded area near railway tracks. She has been stabbed multiple times. This location, secluded woods adjacent to railroad lines, becomes the killing ground. It is dubbed the Lesopolosa Forest Strip. July 1982. Lyubov, Luba, Buryuk, 14, disappears. Her body is found in a similar Lesopolosa. The stab wounds are more numerous. August 1982. Oleg Pozidayev, 9, is murdered. His body shows knife wounds to the chest and abdomen. The investigative response. By late 1982, with several bodies bearing similar wounds found in similar locations, the Rostov police realize they have a serial killer. A major task force is formed. This is a significant event, the creation of a dedicated, if overwhelmed, unit. They begin to map the crimes, noting the proximity to railway stations in Shakhty, Novoshakhtinsk, and Rostov's main station. Their first major operation is launched. The police identified the Lesopolosa and railway station connection very early. Given that this was a predictable hunting ground, what were the tangible, logistical challenges of surveilling hundreds of miles of wooded railway lines and multiple busy stations in the pre-digital, pre-mass CCTV era of the early 1980s Soviet Union? Operation Forest Strip and a Mischance, 1984. After the series of murders in 1982 to 1983, the police, militia, realized they were dealing with a serial killer operating according to a pattern. Victims disappeared from train and bus stations, and their bodies were found in forested areas, Lesopolosa, along the railroad tracks. In response, an operation unprecedented in scale for the region was launched. What the police specifically did: massive saturation of the area, thousands of personnel from the Internal Affairs Directorate UVD, cadets from police schools, People's Volunteer Patrols, Druzhniki, and even internal troops soldiers were deployed on duty. In plain clothes and in uniform, they occupied all key points. Train and bus stations of Rostov, Shakhty, Novoshakhtinsk. Commuter trains and trains operating in the risk zone. The forest strips themselves. Patrols constantly comb the woods along the tracks. Total checks. Any man found alone in these places, especially in the evening, was stopped for document checks. His passport details, place of work were recorded, and he had to explain the purpose of his presence. Vast card indexes were created, ultimately, tens of thousands of cards. Voluntary compulsory blood tests. This was the key and most scandalous part of the operation. The police had samples of the killer's semen, which could be used to determine his blood type and secretor/non-secretor status. Since Chikatilo had a rare blood type, a B type 4, and was a non-secretor, his blood type could not be identified from biological fluids. This was an important marker. Men whose behavior or appearance aroused suspicion might be asked to come to the station to clarify details, where they were offered to provide a saliva or blood sample. Formally, it was voluntary, but refusal immediately made the person the prime suspect. Traps with live bait. Sometimes, female police officers in civilian clothes worked undercover as lone teenagers or young women in potential hunting grounds. Covert surveillance was maintained on them. Chikatilo was a participant in the operation. This is not just a rumor. It is documented in the case materials and in Chikatilo's own testimony at trial. How did he become a participant? His status: Andrei Chikatilo was a member of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, CPSU, and worked as a supply clerk at the Rostov factory. Rostelmash. He was a man with a correct biography, socially reliable. Under the conditions of total mobilization for the fight against the Boris Strip maniac, party and Komsomol organizations of enterprises were recruited to assist the police. Chikatilo, like many others, could have been drafted into a People's Volunteer Patrol, Druzina, or simply as a responsible worker for duty shifts. Evidence. According to some reports, he indeed stood duty at the Rostov station as part of such groups. His task could have been the simplest: to observe, report on suspicious individuals, possibly check documents. There are no precise records of his duty schedule, but the fact of his participation was confirmed during the investigation. September 1984. The survivor. In a wooded area near the Donlestra station, 16-year-old Igor, or Dmitry, sources vary, Tashnikov is attacked. The assailant stabs him, but the boy fights back fiercely and escapes. He provides a detailed description to sketch artists. A tall man, about 50, with a large nose, wearing glasses, dressed in shabby clothes, and carrying a vaska, a ubiquitous Soviet string bag. This is a goldmine for investigators. A living witness. The detention. Shortly after the attack, officers at a nearby train station detain a man who matches the description. It is Andrei Chikatilo. He is taken to the local police station for questioning. The interrogation that wasn't. Chikatilo presents his documents, his internal passport and, crucially, his Communist Party membership card. He states he was in the area visiting his sister. Officers search his vaska. They find a small jar of lubricant, Vaseline, a towel, and a length of rope. They note his nervous demeanor and a fresh scratch on his face. They take a saliva sample for a primitive blood type test. The test is inconclusive. He is a non-secretor, meaning his blood type cannot be easily determined from bodily fluids. Faced with a party member, a plausible story, and no immediate forensic link, the officers release him after several hours of questioning. They file a report, and his name is added to the ever-growing list of persons of interest. This is the most famous missed opportunity. Let's itemize the facts from that day. Chikatilo was detained because he matched a physical description of a man who had just attempted murder. In his bag were a rope and lubricant. He had a fresh facial injury. Yet he was released. Which of these factors? The party card, the inconclusive blood test, or the absence of an eyewitness directly placing him with the victim, carried the most weight in that decision? Could a more aggressive interrogation at that moment have broken him? Geographic expansion and bureaucratic walls, 1985 to 1987. Following his release, Chikatilo's attacks become more frequent and brutal. The mutilations intensify. July 1985. He murders Irina Golyayeva, 18, in a forest near Rostov. The violence escalates. The body shows signs of post-mortem mutilation. The Ufa interlude, November 1985. Chikatilo uses his job as a supply clerk to secure a temporary posting in Ufa, a city over 1,000 miles east of Rostov. Within weeks of his arrival, the murders begin there. November 1985, Ufa. Tatyana Petrosyan, 21, and her 10-year-old daughter Svetlana disappear. Their bodies are found in a wooded area near the railway. They have been stabbed multiple times. This is a critical data point. A double murder with the same MO, but in a different military district and police jurisdiction. The investigative disconnect. The Rostov Task Force, struggling with their local crimes, is unaware of the Ufa murders or does not immediately link them. Communication between regional Soviet police departments was poor. There was no centralized, real-time database for violent crimes. The Ufa police investigate the Petrosyan murders as a local tragedy, not part of a national series. Return to Rostov and escalation. Chikatilo returns to Rostov in 1986. The killings continue with grim regularity. Ludmila Alexieva, July 1987. Ivan Bilovetsky, August 1987. The task force is drowning. They now have a partial psychological profile, developed with psychiatrist Dr. Alexander Buchanovsky. The killer is likely a man with sexual dysfunction, a stutter, a menial job, who carries a bag. The Ufa murders are a pivotal forensic clue. What specific protocol or technological tool, commonplace today, was missing in 1985 that would have almost certainly linked the Rostov and Ufa murders within days? Was the barrier more technological, no computer network, or cultural territoriality between regional police chiefs? The Witness and the Sketch, 1988 to 1989. As the body count rises, public fear turns into panic. The killer is nicknamed the Lesopolosny Maniac, Forest Strip Maniac, and, in the press, the Werewolf. 1988, Rostov Main Station. A potential victim is saved by pure chance. A woman observes a tall, shabbily dressed man with glasses talking intensely to a young boy near the platforms. Something in his demeanor alarms her. She intervenes, pretending to be the boy's aunt, and leads him away. She later provides an exceptionally detailed description to the police. The composite sketch. Based on this woman's account, a new, highly detailed composite sketch is produced. It is circulated in newspapers, on television, and on posters across the Rostov region. It bears a striking resemblance to Andrei Chikatilo. Yet, no one identifies him. Not his neighbors, not his co-workers. He is a ghost in plain sight. The task force's desperation. The lead investigator, Isa Kostoev, is under immense pressure from Moscow. The list of suspects is now in the tens of thousands. They begin using a new, laborious tactic. Checking the employment and travel records of every man on their list against the dates and locations of the murders. Chikatilo's name appears and is checked, but his job-related travel provides a plausible, if thin, alibi for some periods. He remains a mid-tier suspect. The 1988 composite sketch was accurate. Chikatilo lived in a communal apartment, worked in an office, shopped in local stores. Why did the widespread publication of this sketch not lead to a single, definitive tip to identify him? Does this speak more to his invisibility as a person, or to a public distrust of engaging with the militia? The final murders and the shift to surveillance, 1990. In its final year, the investigation shifts tactics, and Chikatilo's arrogance peaks. March 1990, Novicherkassk. In a stunning act of defiance, Chikatilo murders Svetlana Korostik, 22, in a small grove of trees. This location is not a remote forest strip. It is within direct line of sight of a permanent police patrol post that had been established specifically to monitor the area for the killer. The body is discovered just meters from the post. This event proves the killer is now mocking the manhunt. The surveillance order. After the Korostik murder, Kostoev makes a critical decision. The strategy of mass document checks and random patrols has failed. He orders a new protocol. continuous, 24-hour physical surveillance on their shortlist of top suspects, now numbering in the dozens. This is a resource-intensive, last-ditch effort. Andrei Chikatilo is on this list. November 6, 1990, The Last Hunt. Undercover officers from the task force begin tailing Chikatilo. What they observe is a textbook display of predatory ritual. He goes to the Rostov bus station. He stalks a young woman, follows her, but aborts. He wanders the streets for hours, seemingly aimless, but constantly scanning. He returns to the station, observes another potential victim, then leaves again. For over 8 hours, he is a shark in a tank, unable to strike under the unseen gaze of his pursuers. Finally, exhausted and having made no contact, he leaves the station grounds. The arrest. As Chikatilo walks away from the transport hub, officers move in. They do not arrest him for a crime committed that day, but for suspicious behavior. At the police station, a search of his Avaska reveals its contents: a long, sharp kitchen knife wrapped in newspaper, a length of clothesline, and a soiled hand towel. The knife is sent for immediate forensic analysis. The surveillance on November 6th was the key. Beyond simply being at the station, what specific, observable behaviors did Chikatilo exhibit during those 8 hours that marked him as a hunter rather than a traveler? How did his movements differ from those of a legitimate passenger or a man waiting for someone? The confession, November 1990. The final act is one of bureaucratic and forensic procedure overcoming years of failure. The forensic breakthrough. While Chikatilo is held, 2 scientific processes unfold. First, traditional serology. His rare blood type is found to match evidence from multiple crime scenes. Second, and more significantly for history, Soviet scientists performed DNA analysis, one of its first uses in a major criminal case in the USSR. While primitive, it provides another link. The confession, November 20th, 1990. Confronted with the physical evidence, the knife, the blood type match, and subjected to relentless interrogation by Kostoyev, Chikatilo's defenses collapse. He does not simply admit guilt. He begins a meticulous, almost clinical narration. He starts with the murder of Lena Zakhanova in 1978. He provides specific details only the killer would know: the weather, what victims were wearing, where he took them, the precise location of the body dump. He draws maps for investigators. His confession is not emotional, it is a cataloging. Over subsequent weeks, the count rises from 20 to 36 to finally 52 confessed murders. The corroboration. Police use his confessions to locate previously unknown burial sites and recover remains. In a grim validation of his testimony, they find the skeletons exactly where he said they would be. Chikatilo's confession was comprehensive. What practical, investigatory value did these detailed confessions provide beyond closing the cases? Did they reveal a consistent, previously unknown pattern in his victim selection or method that earlier profiling had missed? The trial and conclusion, 1992 to 1994. The trial, April 14, 1992 to August 15, 1992. Held in the small town of Rostov-on-Don, the trial was chaotic. Chikatilo, kept in a steel cage after relatives of victims tried to attack him, was often disruptive, shouting, singing Soviet songs, exposing himself. The court heard 52 counts of murder. The prosecution presented forensic evidence and his own confession. The defense argued insanity, but a psychiatric commission found him sane, though with a severe personality disorder. The verdict and execution. On October 15, 1992, he was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. After a lengthy appeals process, on February 14, 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was led into a small execution chamber in Novocherkassk prison. A state executioner fired a single bullet from a pistol into the back of his head. His body was reportedly cremated, and the ashes disposed of in an unmarked location. We have walked through the timeline, event by event. The narrative is clear: an early wrongful execution, a missed interrogation, bureaucratic disconnect between regions, the failure of a public sketch, and finally, success through relentless surveillance and emerging forensic science. Reviewing this sequence, which single investigatory tactic, first introduced in 1990, proved to be the decisive breakthrough? Was it the shift from mass document checks to targeted physical surveillance? Or was it the final, successful application of forensic DNA analysis that sealed his conviction? Could one have worked without the other? Happy New Year to everyone! Subscribe to the channel, and see you next time.